What is up, fam? Agent O here, and I'm actually doing this is actually a response video to a comment on my Black Panther Thrant video that was made by a guy named Matthew Lane. And first of all, I just want to say, thanks for checking out the video and even for leaving a comment, because, I like to geek out about this stuff, and I like to talk with other people that like to also geek out about, this sort of thing. This isn't a response in like anger or malice towards the stuff that you said. I get where you're coming from, and I agree with some of the things you said. And I don't agree with a lot of the things you said. And so rather than me write out an entire novel, as a response to all the points you made, I figured I'm just gonna make a quick video and just address the stuff you said that way, because it would just take me way too long to write it all, and I don't think you'd want to sit there and read all that shit. So it's just easier for me to just make this video. So I'm just gonna jump right in it and try to keep this as short as possible. And I'm gonna talk about the first point you made about whether or not Black Panther actually has as big of a following as I think that they have. Now, I wasn't trying to mislead you or anything about how big the fan base is for the Panther. I was just saying, personally, I was just trying to say that there is interest. I've gone on several different blog sites, and I've checked out, in the comments section whenever they do post any kind of new update about the movie and if it's gonna happen or who's gonna be in it and blah blah blah. There's been fan response, and it's been positive for the most part. I know there's people out there that do want to see it happen. I don't, how many, yeah, there's no way I'm gonna ever know that. And I never was trying to say that it was like Spider-Man or Batman level of interest, for a Black Panther movie. I just know there's enough interest that Marvel's actually working towards putting this thing out and making it marketable and the whole 9 yards. So yeah, I wasn't trying to make it seem like it was anything bigger than what it was. Maybe I should have just addressed that, or maybe you were assuming too much. Maybe I should have taken more time to actually make a point to mention that there's interest. It's just not that huge. But you also made another point about Panther not being a very interesting character, and that in his books he's absent of personality. I mean, he has personality. He's royalty. He's a king. He's from a large company, one of the richest in the world. So he's gonna have like a one percenter kind of attitude, and he's gonna have that I am the king, and he's got to be, because that's kind of what's expected from that somebody who's fucking royalty. And I'm gonna give you a counter argument to that. I'm gonna point out how Batman actually doesn't have a whole lot of personality himself. Like, he's pretty much a dark, brooding, angsty guy, and he hasn't really deviated from that personality for many, many years. And look how popular he is. So I don't think personality is the issue here. And I also think that that's also the responsibility of the writer, to make him interesting, to give him interesting dialogue, and to have him go through, have him be portrayed showing all sorts of wide range of emotions, because I think that's going to also help people. I guess I hate to use the word relate, because people just throw that around because they can't think of anything else to say. But that's gonna, I guess, make him more palatable, I guess, to the audience or whatever. Because there's no real way you can relate to an African king who has superpowers, and is super smart. There's no way you could relate to that, So yeah, I think it's just gonna make him more human, I guess, is what I'm looking for. He's gonna be a more human character if they write him right, which that's one of the things. That's the job of the screenwriter, and that's the job of the comic book writer, is to make him interesting. And I think during the Christopher Priest run of the Black Panther series, he was pretty interesting. Hell, even during the Reginald Hudlin run, I liked the Panther. I like the way he was portrayed in those books. He was serious, and he was always, he was always like, I'm a man on a mission. But like I said, so is Batman. If Batman isn't, helping the Justice League, beat whatever, intergalactic threat of the week that there is, then he's on his mission in Gotham cleaning up the streets, and people don't really want to see him doing anything other than that. So, I think as long as they stick to what makes T'Challa T'Challa, he's gonna be a cool character. He's gonna be an interesting character. Now, you also talked about the book not, always being canceled due to low sales, and you think it's because he's not you think it's because he's so super powerful and he's got super science, super magic, and he comes from a Mary Sue nation. Now, first of all, I'm gonna ask you to stop right there with the Mary Sue shit, because always read and I always hear people throw that term around, the whole Mary Sue term, like it's a valid arguing point. When every superhero character either has Mary Sue moments in their continuity, or they have fucking Mary Sue fucking MacGuffin powers. I mean, Superman's the biggest Mary Sue of them all because he's insanely strong, he's super fast, he's completely invulnerable, he's super smart, he can blow winds out of his mouth that fucking freeze, he has eye lasers, and he has x-ray vision. Like, he is the epitome of the Mary Sue, but people still love Superman, and it's still acceptable. So to point out that, Black Panther's a Mary Sue, you may as well be pointing out the fact that superheroes wear capes, or that some of them still wear their underwear on the outside, because you're not really telling me anything that I don't already know. And as far as like the low sales, yeah, once a comic book, ceases to be interesting, it's gonna eventually die out. And that's what's always happened with the Black Panther comics. They start off really good and they start off really strong, and then when they send that writer that was making the comic really good, or maybe they changed out the team and the artist that was working on there that did really good artwork, now they're gone too, then people become disinterested. But that happens with a lot of books. I'm sorry, not Daredevil. Deadpool is a perfect example of this, because he's had a Deadpool comic, come out on 3 different occasions. He had a comic in the '90s that went kaput after a while. Then he had the Cable and Deadpool comic, which went on for about 60 issues or whatever, and then that went kaput. And then I think he's got a comic now. He's got another comic now going on that's ongoing. And people swear up and down that they're Deadpool fans, but they can't keep that book in circulation. And that's because eventually people get disinterested, and they move on to other shit that's more interesting, and the book dies off. So I don't think it's because of the character and the mythos itself. It's because of writers not knowing what to do with the character. You see it. I've seen it so many times in other comics. Take the New 52 for instance. Animal Man's not an interesting character to me, but because they wrote the book so well, that was like one of the hottest books in the New 52 lineup. Whereas you had, Static Shock, where they tried to make they tried to make the comic book like the fucking cartoon, and it fucking failed because it was just written so poorly. Like, it was done after the 9th issue. Same thing with the Savage Hawkman. I mean, the Hawkman's a cool character. He was part of the Big Seven in the Justice League, and that comic book failed because, once again, they failed to write an interesting book. So it's not because of the character, it's because of the writer or the writers on the book. Now, you made the point about, that the only thing the Black Panther had going for him is that he's black and he's not a racist cliche, and that doesn't cut the mustard in the America of today. But honestly, the America of today is still not that much different from America back in the day. There's been some changes, but you know the old saying, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And there's still a lot of racism in history, and there's been a lot of, not outward racism, but it's been kind of closeted racism within the entertainment industry, within movies, and still within comics, because you still don't have a whole lot of headlining characters of color in comics. They're not up there with the Supermans and the Iron Mans and the Justice League or the Avengers. It's still not as diverse as it could be. So I don't really know where you're coming from with that, because racism still exists in these mediums. You might not see it, but it's there. And there's been actors, and there's been comic book writers who have spoken out about these things, and they've talked about these things. But still people want to act like it doesn't exist, and these guys are just whistling Dixie or something. But once again, that statement, I don't really know what you're talking about, because from what I've seen and what I've read, you're basically giving me a fallacy, practically. So, I'm just gonna leave it at that. Now, I did dig your whole African team of, in your RPG game. That's kind of cool. You're thinking out of the box, and that's always good. But, you know, you think that they're not as cliched as the Black Panther, but I mean, what is really cliche about the Black Panther other than the fact that he's an African king? Like when Stan Lee and Jack Kirby created the character back in the day, he actually wasn't cliche, because there were no black characters that were super smart and that had access to super advanced technology and gadgets and weren't of African royalty. He was a strong, the character is a strong black character, and that was non-existent back then. So it wasn't cliche back then. So if anything, it might have started the cliche of creating strong characters of color. So once again, I don't know where you're coming from with that. As why the Panther is cliche. There weren't a whole lot of African king superheroes in comics back then or even now. So I don't know where you're coming from with that, honestly. But you also think that the character is dull and that he has no personality or no real drive. Now, that kind of tells me you might not be that you might not have read the comics. I don't know. Maybe you did and it just didn't interest you or anything. But his drive has always been to serve and protect his country as king. To make sure they're safe and that they uphold their country's traditional values, from a moral, just to serve the country from a moral and ethical level. And there's been times where he's been tested on those things, and he's worked hard to make the right choices. And so that tells me you don't read the comics, just from that statement on its own. Maybe in other comics he wasn't written with a whole lot of interesting personality, but he's a king that has had a lot of education. So he's going to always be looking at things from an analytical point of view. How does this best serve my country? How does this best serve me? He's not going. His personality isn't good. He's not going to be like a wisecracking, angry guy or something. He's not gonna be any of those cliche stereotypes that you've seen with other black characters. And he's not gonna act like Namor, who's stuck up. He's like stuck up and pompous, and he's angry. That's not the Panther either. The Panther's he's calculating, and he's analytical, and in some cases he can be pretty cold. He can be pretty cold as a person. So and he doesn't take shit from people because he's royalty. So you're gonna so those aspects of the character are what you're gonna see a lot of. Same thing with Batman. Batman constantly lives with the trauma of what happened to him as a kid and his ultimate drive to you know rid his city of crime because every day he's practically reliving the death of his parents, and that's part of what drives him and gives him that indomitable willpower. And once again, that's a character that's super popular, and that's the DC's most popular money making character, and he's other than Batman being the goddamn Batman, he's kind of dull and dry too. So if they write if you write the character right and you put him through the paces and you put them through stuff that's going to stress them out or run them through the ringer, and that's going to bring up other aspects of their personality, and you're gonna see how they work through their conflicts. That's what's going to make them more interesting. And once again, that's one of the things I feel they need to do to make an interesting Black Panther movie. And you also said about how that's made him a poison pill for a translation to the silver screen. Once again, I bring up Batman. They did enough with Batman, and they made sure to add aspects and things about his character. One of them adding a love interest, to Batman, and in a lot of ways, well, God, I don't even want to get into the Nolan Batman universe because to me that was a failure in my eyes, and I could easily go in and point out to you why that version of Batman is not Batman. But that would be a whole nother video, a whole nother Thrant for a whole nother day. I would have to enlist the aid of Strident because we've talked about this aspect numerous times, and we both ended up just realizing how much we can't stand that trilogy, and it's not a good trilogy other than Batman Begins. But that's once again another Thrant for another day. And that was kind of and you brought up the point about Static and Icon. That was kind of my point in the Thrant, was that Warner Brothers has a property that they can take advantage of and put out there and make it popular and make it easily accessible to people, but they just choose not to for whatever reason. I mean, Warner Brothers just makes one bad business move after another. I don't know. I don't know what's going on over there, but you basically, I mean, I guess we're just agreeing on that point about Static. So, yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I don't know why they're not doing I don't know why they're doing what they're doing over there at DC or Warner Brothers or whatever. And as for your last point, I mean, wow. I mean, wow, you couldn't be more wrong about your last statement. It Damn. all right. All right. Let me just start from the beginning. You make the point about how Icon and Static are more socially relevant to an American audience regardless of ethnicity. The whole street crime, urban sprawl thing, yada yada yada. Yeah, the Black Panther doesn't deal with that. He deals with his country and running a country and dealing with outside threats to a country. That's actually relevant now with with how America seems to like to run up into other countries and invade them under the guise of democracy, and it's really just to get their resources or to oust somebody that they put in power in the first place, i.e. Saddam Hussein. So yeah, it's still, the Panther can be relevant. Just because he's black doesn't mean he has to be a street level superhero. That's you have Cage and you have Daredevil and you have Iron Fist and you have the new Power Man. You know, you have all these other characters that do that already. You know, that's why the Black Panther was created, because he's not that's he's a superhero that can handle the big shit. Um, and that's one of the things they need to show in the movie. You know, it just like how they did with Captain America: Winter Soldier. You know, they showed how Captain America, how they took something that's relevant in our society right now, with how the NSA spies on everybody, and how our government wants to take it to the terrorists before they have a chance to even to even act in any terrorist activity. So yeah, they applied that to the Captain America movies. Now, the statement I just made earlier about invading countries and about how countries try to overthrow other countries in order to get their resources, bam, they can apply that shit to the Black Panther movie right there. So, so there's me debunking that part of your statement right there. And once again, you bring up uh, the whole applying it to the Western audience. That's kind of the thing that a lot of, I guess, black writers and just writers of color in general are trying to get away from with ethnic characters. You know, we're all tired of seeing, you know, Luke Cage fight, you know, street thugs when he's powerful enough to handle some of the other, you know, bigger characters in the Marvel, you know, bigger bad guys in the Marvel, you know, universe. Maybe not by himself, but but on the team of Avengers. You know, he's a lot smarter than a lot of the comics kind of portray him. There's been comics where they point out, there's been issues where they point out how Cage knows, you know, several different languages, and you know, he portrays he what is it? He projects himself as this street smart individual, but he's actually a lot smarter than that. But he wants people to underestimate him, so that when he does, so that by the time they do realize that, you know, that they're not, that he's more than what he's making himself out to be, it's too late. He's already gotten the drop on them, and bam, the, you know, fight was over before it even begun. They point this they pointed this out in comics before. Um, Same thing with Black Panther. He's too smart to deal with any of that shit. You know, he's handling shit on a country world level. You know, he's had to handle Doctor Doom. You know, who's one of the, you know, who's a big bad in the Marvel universe, and he's handled him, you know, to the point he's fought him and beat him, and then Doom has come back and beat him and damn near killed him, damn near almost destroyed his country. So there goes your whole Mary Sue Nation point, you know, because all you have to do is read Doom War, and you'll see how Doctor Doom fucked Panther's world up pretty good in that story arc. Um, and as far as his ill-defined, sometimes superpowers, his power set's pretty defined. He has enhanced strength and reflexes, enhanced agility. He has animal senses. It's all been given to him by the Panther god Bast. All you have to do is Wikipedia or Comic Vine all this shit, and it's pretty well documented. So once again, I don't know where you're coming with that. Um, that leads me to believe that maybe you don't read the books, or maybe you didn't read up on the character. Now, if you really want to talk about somebody who has an undefined power set, you can easily look at Superman. You know, they never actually tell you just how much Superman can lift, and throughout the years, his strength has been, his super strength has been increased, it's been decreased. Now with the New 52, I'm not sure. And even then, you have certain writers who make him able, who write him to be able to do certain things, but then not be able to do certain things. Like there was once an issue where he fought an angel, and I thought Superman was supposed to be vulnerable to, you know, magic. You know, that would be, you know, theological, I guess, acts would be considered magic in some circles. So once again, you know, it's I hate to use the word convoluted. It's like you said, it's undefined, and it's written, his strength is always written in convenience to whatever story it is that the writer is trying to tell. But with the Panther, they never actually show you. They never actually show you him lifting like cars or doing acts of like insane amounts of super strength. You know, he's done or he's either used his tech built into his suit in order to allow him to achieve certain things that maybe might make him seem more powerful or more durable than he would be without them. But once again, that's why he has all that tech, to help level the playing field. So yeah, well, like one last point I wanted to make, when you were saying that the whole street crime, urban sprawl thing was going to pretty much appeal to a Western audience than an African king. That's kind of what's wrong with our audience. That's kind of why I think they need to do this Black Panther movie, is because we need to get people to start thinking outside of that. One of the things I pointed out in the video, in the Thrant video, was how it was hard for people that I talked to about a potential movie, wrapping their heads around Wakanda itself and it being this technological country in the middle of Africa, of all of Africa, and how some people couldn't get their head around that this could work on screen for an audience. And we need to start doing movies like this so that people can get used to seeing these things, and then they can accept it without realizing that they've been limiting their own suspension of disbelief. That's basically that's one of my biggest things about why this movie should be made is, we need to start shattering some of these preconceived notions about taking comic books and their existing continuity or their mythology, and then trying to apply all this real world logic. Like, that doesn't make any sense. It's a comic book and it's fantasy. It's the only genre that you can have wizards and warlocks and aliens and people with extraordinary abilities, and it all kind of works, and it all kind of works together, and it all kind of makes sense. So how can you apply how can you sit there and let your suspension of disbelief go for some things and then not go for others? Like, you sat there and you watched a guy, put on a suit of armor and fly around and shoot missiles and do all kinds of, dope stuff. You saw a guy turn from a geeky scientist into this giant green Hulk guy, and with insane strength. You saw a guy literally get injected with super steroids, and he became a war hero, and that was acceptable. It was okay for you, or it was okay for people to watch that, and their suspension of disbelief was not impacted in the slightest. But it's hard for people to wrap their heads around an African king that got powers from a panther god or a panther spirit, and he rules a country that is the most technologically advanced country in Africa, in the entire world, and that's too hard for people to wrap their heads around, for their suspension of disbelief. Like, they're gonna be like, oh, this comic book is so unrealistic. I mean, a Black Panther king in a country a country in Africa that has technology? This isn't at all what I've seen in National Geographic. Like, come on, man. I mean, seriously, people need to be more open-minded. But anyway, I'm gonna wrap up this video right here, because we're at the end of Matthew Lane's comment. And like I said, I'm not making this comment response video out of anger or anything. This was the only way I felt I could fully address your points and the statements that you made, without having to write a dictionary-sized response in the comments section. So yeah, that's gonna do it, and hope to hear from you again, Matthew Lane. This is Agent O, and I am out. Peace.